Canterbury Creek in what we now call Hunter. It used to be called Edwardsville after him. He started that in 1817, and then Zadig Pratt created the largest tannery and the largest leather-producing enterprise in the world in Prattsville. And he created that in 1825. The problem is that tanning was traditionally tanning had been done by stripping the bark of oak and soaking the oak in water with the hide. After taking all the feathers, all the hair off the hide, you would soak that hide for days, take it out, dry, put it back in, so on and so forth, in oak. It was discovered sometime in late 1700s, early 1800s, that hemlock was very good for tanning as well, and hemlock would produce a very strong, sort of reddish colored, if you kind of think of saddle leather, a really tough leather. And so hemlock tanning became a business craze. Edwards and Pratt beginning it, but right here in the Esopus Valley, Augustus Gijou, and I think there are still Gijous around here, started the Empire Tannery in 1831 on the Esopus Creek, because you need water, obviously, for a tannery. So you're seeking a place that has your two resources, water and bark. In Big Indian, the Way Tannery was established in 1835 by Robert Humphrey. Isaac Smith set up a tannery in 1844 in Birch Creek. In Fox Hollow, Charles and Giles Isham set up a tannery in 1835. So the tanning industry was here at the same time that the tanning industry was going on up in the Schoharie and Prattsville, but it was a much bigger industry. These were smaller tanneries down here. But the problem is that the life expectancy of a tannery is about 27 years because you run out of hemlock. And most of us, I think, are aware. Mike is here, the leading expert on the Catskills forest. Most of us are aware that the Catskill forest, the hemlock stands were decimated by the bark peeling and the rest of the tree is sort of left behind, and often in some instances, many instances. So in the 1850s comes, Zadig Pratt's out of hemlock. And there was a little 13-year-old boy up there named James Walton Dutcher. And the Zadig Pratt's tannery had been out of business since he was 7 years old. And now he's 13 years old. His daddy dies. He's got to find a way to make a living, and so he walks down through by the Devil's Tombstone in those areas. He walks down from Prattsville to Shandaken. And here he finds hemlock heaven. And James Dutcher, 13 years old, becomes a bark peeler. Bark peeling is the dirtiest kind of work that can be. The bark has to be removed in the spring and early summer. By July, the reason the bark has to be removed then is because there's some kind of a milky substance that between the tree and the bark, and that allows you to pull the bark off. Once that's gone, once that's dried up, I think I've got this right, then it's very difficult to get the bark off. You're not peeling anymore. So peeling season is like April, May, June, and ends usually around the 4th of July. Bark peelers would go into the woods. They would build a hut out of the remains of the trees that they had cut to collect the bark. So they were living in these sort of bark and stick huts. I guess the stuff got all over you, that sappy stuff that I was just talking about. I don't know, I think they put something on themselves to keep the flies away. But anyway, they used to say around these parts that you could smell a bark peeler before you saw him. That if a bark peeler was coming to visit you, you'd get it. And that was James Walton Dutcher from the time he was 13 and 14 and 15. But he was an industrious kid, and before you know it, he had other guys. He had whole teams of bark peeling, and was able to build up a successful business supplying the local tanneries and bark. A resourceful guy. Later, when he saw that tourism was coming to the Catskills, which occurred about the same time as the railroad came in, he put up a hotel, the Panther Mountain House. And James Dutcher became one of the founders, if you will, of the Ashokan Watershed. He was right there at the head of it, up in the Oliveria Valley. And he was kind of a major figure around here. What I find cool is that there are still Dutchers around here. That I taught at Onteora for a number of years. One of the finest students I had there just graduated from New Paltz with a 3.97, and she is a direct descendant of James Walton Dutcher. So we're talking about some pretty smart and resourceful people who may have smelled a bit, which might put the rest of us off, but were able to pass those kinds of genes down to somebody who ends up summa cum laude.